The jungle was dark and still, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and strange plants, the night sky above hidden by thick alien trees, whose branches twisted like giant claws. No wind moved through the leaves, no insect dared to hum, and no animal called out in the shadows. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath. Far away in the blackness something moved, silent and smooth, slipping between the trees, without breaking a single twig, its body low to the ground, its limbs long and strong, the shape of a hunter born for killing, its skin almost melting into the darkness, its eyes narrow slits glowing faint green in the faint light that slipped through the canopy. It did not hurry. It never needed to hurry. It had stalked prey many times before, and it always won. Every step was placed with care, every sound avoided, its breathing slow and steady. It moved like a shadow, but with a mind sharp and focused. Tonight it hunted something different, not the small creatures that darted through the underbrush, not the armored beasts that grazed by the river. Tonight it hunted one of the new arrivals, the two-legged ones who built fires and made strange noises, the ones who did not fear the night, the way the rest of the jungle did. Ahead of it, hidden under a large tree, was a small camp. A faint orange glow from a dying fire marked the spot. The smell of smoke drifted through the air. The hunter's eyes locked on the thin fabric shape at the center of the camp, a human tent, inside it the scent of warm blood and living flesh. The predator paused in the shadows, waiting, listening, its ears tuned to the slow rhythm of breathing from inside the tent. It could hear the heartbeats, soft and steady. It waited for the right moment. Patience was its greatest weapon. The jungle's silence wrapped around it like a cloak. Time itself seemed to slow as the hunter prepared to strike. It crept closer, each movement slow as a falling leaf, its claws flexing in the dirt, the smell of the prey growing stronger. The fire crackled faintly, but the wind carried no spark. A small insect landed on the predator's arm, but it did not move. Its mind fixed on the sleeping human. In a few heartbeats the hunt would be over. The hunter's body tensed, muscles coiling. It could almost taste the moment of the kill. Its shadow stretched long across the ground as it stepped forward, one paw pressing into the soil with no sound, its head lowering toward the tent, its jaws parting slightly to release a silent hiss. But then, without warning, something unexpected happened. The sound from inside the tent changed, the breathing shifted, and the fabric rustled. The human inside was awake. The predator froze instantly, every sense on high alert. It expected the sharp scent of fear, the sudden rise in heart rate, the quick movement of prey trying to escape. Instead, the human slowly unzipped the flap of the tent. The dim firelight fell across a face, calm and almost bored. One eye opened and looked directly at the predator. There was no scream, no gasp, no rush to grab a weapon. The human's mouth opened, and a long, slow yawn escaped into the night. The predator tilted its head, confusion flickering in its thoughts. It had hunted many kinds of prey, but never one that greeted its approach like this. The human stretched its arms lazily, as if waking up in the safety of a city bedroom instead of facing an alien hunter in the dead of night. The jungle remained silent, the air thick with the strange stillness of this moment. The predator's claws shifted slightly in the dirt, unsure whether to leap or retreat. It searched the human's eyes for the spark of fear, but found none. The human blinked slowly, then rubbed at their face with one hand. The fire crackled faintly again, casting shifting shadows across both of them. The predator's tail swayed once, its instinct screaming to act, yet its mind hesitating for the first time in its life. The human's voice broke the silence, low and calm, carrying no trace of panic. A single word spoken with the weight of someone more annoyed than afraid. "Really?" the human said softly. At this hour, the words floated through the cool air, reaching the predator's ears like a puzzle it did not know how to solve. In the treetops above, unseen creatures shifted slightly, their eyes glowing faintly as they watched. Even they seemed curious about what would happen next. The predator blinked once, its jaw closing slowly, the moment stretching longer and longer as two very different worlds stared at each other in the half-light of the dying fire. The jungle waited with them, every leaf and root holding still, the stars above hidden, the night itself pausing to witness something it had never seen before, A hunter and its prey locked in a meeting that did not follow the old laws of predator and victim, both standing in the quiet space between instinct and choice. The air filled not with fear or rage, but with something new, something unknown, something that would change both of them before the night was over. The predator stood still in the dim firelight, its breathing low and silent, its muscles ready to spring at any second, yet its mind was caught in the strange calm of the human before it. This was not how the hunt was supposed to go. There was no fear to feed on, no panic to quicken the kill, only the slow, steady heartbeat of a creature that did not seem to care it was staring into the eyes of death. The human stretched again, shoulders rolling back as if shaking off a heavy sleep, their eyes half closed, mouth opening wide in another long lazy yawn that seemed to echo through the silent jungle. It was a sound of comfort, not of alarm, as if the predator were no more threatening than the morning sun. The predator's head tilted slightly, its gaze fixed on the strange shape of this moment. The instinct to lunge still coiled inside it, but held down by something it could not name. The human leaned forward and placed both hands on the ground, pushing themselves upright with slow and unhurried movements. The firelight flickered across their face, casting faint shadows under the eyes and along the curve of their jaw. There was no weapon in their hand, no defensive stance in their posture. Instead, they simply sat cross-legged before the small fire, looking at the predator like one might look at a passing stray animal. The predator's claws flexed in the dirt, its tail moving in a slow, deliberate sway, its ears catching every faint sound in the night. Somewhere far away, a branch cracked under the weight of something large, but neither predator nor human turned to look. The space between them was locked tight, as though the rest of the jungle did not exist for these few moments. The human reached into a pack lying beside the tent. The predator's eyes narrowed and its muscles tensed again, expecting a weapon to emerge. Instead, the human's hand came out holding a small metal container. They tapped the lid with a finger. A soft click echoed in the air. The scent of food drifted out, sharp and rich, unlike anything the predator had ever smelled in its life. Its nose twitched without its permission, the aroma pulling at a different hunger, one that had nothing to do with the kill. The human gave a small half-smile and spoke again, their voice carrying the strange mix of patience and amusement. "You hungry?" they asked, the words falling heavy in the air. The predator did not move, its mind trying to match the sounds to meaning. It understood enough to feel the shape of the question, but its body refused to answer. The human took a piece of the food from the container, unwrapped it from a thin, crinkling layer, and tossed it gently to the ground between them. The small object landed with barely a sound, resting in the dirt halfway between the fire and the predator's paws. The aroma grew stronger, thick and warm. The predator's eyes stayed fixed on the human, but its nostrils flared, pulling in the scent again and again. The jungle around them seemed to lean in. Even the hidden eyes in the treetops watched without blinking, waiting to see which way this strange meeting would turn. The predator stepped forward, slow and careful, its claws sliding over the ground without a whisper. It lowered its head toward the offering, sniffing once, then twice. The human did not move, their gaze steady and unshaken. The predator's jaw opened slightly, its sharp teeth glinting in the firelight. Instinct screamed that its fangs should sink into the human's flesh instead of this strange object. Yet the scent told a different story, rich with warmth and energy. It bit into the food, the texture strange and soft, the taste unlike anything it had known. It chewed once, then swallowed, and for the first time in its life, it fed without killing. The human nodded slowly, as though the moment confirmed something they had already decided. They took another piece from the container, holding it loosely in their hand, their arm extended toward the predator without fear. The predator took one cautious step closer, its body still tense, its gaze flicking from the human's face to the food, its mind torn between suspicion and the pull of this new experience. From somewhere deeper in the jungle came the faint cry of a night bird, high and sharp. The sound seemed to signal that time was moving again. The fire gave a small pop as the coal broke apart, sending a brief swirl of sparks into the air. The predator's eyes followed them before returning to the human's hand, the food still waiting there. The predator reached forward, its teeth closing gently over the offered piece. It pulled it from the human's fingers, without touching their skin. The warmth of the food filled its mouth, and something shifted in the air between them. The predator's tail stilled, its ears lowered slightly. Its body no longer aimed like a weapon, but curved into something else, something not yet trust, but no longer pure threat. The human leaned back slightly, resting their weight on their hands, looking at the predator with a kind of tired curiosity, as if this meeting was nothing more than an interruption to a long quiet night. The predator finished the second piece and stood still, unsure whether to leave or remain, its gaze still locked on this strange, fearless creature who had just broken the unspoken law of predator and prey. Above them, the thick canopy swayed faintly, though no wind could be felt. Shadows moved in the leaves, watching silently, and somewhere far off a deeper sound rumbled through the night, low and heavy, carrying a weight that made even the ground seem to listen. The predator's ears twitched, its head turning slightly toward the direction of the sound, its instincts alerting it to something dangerous. The human's eyes followed its gaze, but they did not look alarmed. Instead, they picked up another piece of food and set it on a small flat rock near the fire, then reached for a stick to poke at the embers. The flames rose slightly, sending new light spilling across the clearing. For a moment the predator's green eyes gleamed brighter, reflecting the light like polished stones. The distant rumble came again, closer this time, a vibration that seemed to move through the roots under their feet. The predator's body stiffened, its claws digging into the earth. It knew that sound. It had heard it only a few times before, and each time it meant danger far greater than itself, danger that even it would avoid. The humans still did not show fear, their calm like a wall against the tension rising in the clearing. The predator took one slow step backward, its gaze fixed on the trees from where the sound had come. The human tilted their head and studied it, perhaps sensing that the night's balance was shifting. The jungle grew quieter still, every unseen creature holding its place, waiting, as the sound of something huge moving through the undergrowth grew louder, each step shaking leaves from the branches above. The predator glanced back at the human, and in that look was something almost like a warning. The human met its gaze without flinching, their hand resting lightly on the metal container, the firelight painting both of their faces in warm, shifting tones, the air between them charged with the weight of something unknown. Then the sound came again, closer than before, a deep guttural growl rolling through the clearing, shaking the air like distant thunder. The predator's tail lashed once, its body angling toward the sound, ready to face what was coming. The human leaned forward slightly, their voice calm and steady as they spoke words the predator could not fully understand but could feel in their tone. "Guess you are not the only one out tonight," they said, their eyes never leaving the shadows ahead. The jungle held its breath as the deep growl faded into the distance, only to return again a heartbeat later, stronger and heavier than before, sending a shiver through the ground under their feet. The predator's claws pressed deeper into the soil, its eyes fixed on the black wall of trees ahead, every muscle in its body tense and ready, while its tail cut slow, deliberate arcs through the humid night air. The human did not rise from their place near the fire, their head tilted slightly, as though listening for something in the sound beyond the danger itself. Their face calmed, their shoulders loose, one hand still resting on the metal container of food, the other lightly gripping the stick they had used to stir the embers. The predator could smell no fear from them, only the scent of smoke and cooked rations, and something strange beneath it, a scent the predator could not name but felt drawn toward. The distant thing moved closer, breaking branches as it came, its steps shaking leaves from the high canopy above. Somewhere in the darkness, large shapes leapt away from the sound, fleeing into the deeper jungle. The predator's instincts screamed for it to vanish into the safety of shadows, yet it stayed, its eyes locked on the human, as though waiting for a sign, waiting to see if the one who had offered it food would run or fight, or do something entirely new. The human finally looked away from the dark trees and back to the predator, their eyes steady, their voice quiet, but carrying easily in the heavy night air. They spoke again, in that same tone as before, the words soft but certain. "Breakfast, then," they said, as if the arrival of a greater danger was no more than a change in the weather. With slow movements they reached into the metal container again, pulling out another wrapped piece of food. This time, they did not toss it halfway between them. Instead, they placed it gently on the flat rock by the fire. The predator's eyes followed the motion, its ears still tuned to the growing thunder of steps approaching from the trees, but the scent of the offering reached it again, warm, rich, promising energy. The predator took a careful step toward the rock, its head low, its eyes still flicking toward the sound in the jungle. The human watched, without moving, without lifting a weapon, without raising a barrier. The only light in the clearing was the soft orange glow of the fire, casting long shadows across the predator's sleek body, and the human's calm face. The smell of burning wood wrapped around them, holding back the thick, damp scent of the jungle for just a little longer. Another growl rolled out from the darkness. This one so close the leaves above rattled the predator's ears flattened back, its claws scraping against the rock. As it reached the food, it snapped it up, quickly chewing twice before swallowing, and turning its head toward the danger, its tail lashed in quick warning strokes, its body angled between the human and the approaching threat, as if drawn by some instinct it could not resist. The human leaned forward, resting elbows on knees, eyes narrowing slightly. As they peered into the shadows beyond the clearing, the growl came again, and now a shape began to form in the dark, huge and low, and moving with a terrible weight. The predator recognized it instantly, the alpha beast of this part of the jungle, a creature even seasoned hunters avoided for its strength and its hunger. The alpha beast stepped into the edge of the firelight, its hide thick and ridged like the bark of the oldest trees, its head massive with tusks that curved upward like hooked blades, its eyes small, but burning with a cold light. It took another step forward, the ground underfoot shaking with the weight, its breath a deep rumble that vibrated in the predator's chest. The predator stood tall for the first time that night, no longer crouching in the posture of a stalker, but straight and wide, its tail stiff, its teeth bared in warning. The human did not move from their seated place. Instead, they reached into their pack once more, and this time pulled out 2 more pieces of food, setting one on the rock and keeping the other in hand. They glanced at the predator, their voice as steady as ever. "Might need the energy," they said with a faint curl of the lips, almost a smile. The predator's mind wrestled with the moment, torn between the urge to flee from the alpha beast and the strange pull to stay near the human. Its eyes flicked from the food to the massive shape now advancing into the clearing. The alpha beast's gaze swept over both of them, settling first on the predator, then shifting to the human, a slow, cruel intelligence flickering in its stare. The jungle behind it went silent. Nothing dared move or breathe, while the alpha beast's steps brought it closer. The firelight catching on the curve of its tusks, the predator took the piece of food from the rock in one swift motion, swallowing it whole without chewing it, then turned to face the alpha beast, head on its body lowering slightly into a stance ready to strike or defend as needed. The humans stood at last, moving with the same unhurried grace they had shown all night, their shoulders loose, their gaze calmed. They held the last piece of food in their hand, as if it mattered more than the towering monster before them. The alpha beast paused, its nostrils flaring, as if confused by the lack of fear. The predator took a half step forward, placing itself squarely between the beast and the human. The fire flickered between them, sending shadows leaping up the trees. Somewhere above, a branch broke and crashed to the ground far away. Startled by the tension below, the alpha beast let out another growl, deeper and sharper this time, a challenge that rolled into the ground and through the air. The predator answered with a hiss that cut like a blade. The 2 locked in a stare, each waiting for the other to move. The human took one more step toward them, both the piece of food still in hand, their voice soft but unshaken. "Let us all eat first," they said in a tone so strange for the moment that the predator almost turned to look at them in disbelief. Yet the words hung in the air between all 3 shapes, predator, prey, and something in between. The alpha beast tilted its massive head slightly, as if the sound of the voice had reached somewhere deep inside it. The fire crackled again, breaking the silence for a heartbeat, and then the alpha beast took a single step forward, closing more of the distance, its breath washing over them in a wave of heat and the thick metallic scent of fresh blood from some earlier kill. The predator held its ground, every muscle burning with readiness. The human's eyes shone faintly in the firelight, their hand lowering the food slightly, as though offering it to the night itself. And then, without warning, the alpha beast's body shifted weight onto its front limbs, its tusks lowering, its claws digging into the soil, the air around them tightening like a cord pulled to breaking point. The predator's tail snapped in warning. The human's gaze never wavered. The jungle seemed to lean closer, waiting to see which way the cord would snap as the next heartbeat threatened to spill into chaos. The air in the clearing felt heavy enough to crush the breath from their lungs. The predator's stance was locked, its claws deep in the dirt, its body a barrier of sinew and steel between the human and the massive alpha beast. Before them, the firelight flickered along the sharp ridges of the beast's tusks and the thick armored skin that covered its frame. Each breath it took came with a low rumble that vibrated through the soil. The predator could feel it in its bones like the drumbeat of war. The humans stood just behind the predator, their hands still holding the last piece of food. The light from the flames dancing across their calm face, their eyes steady and unafraid. They moved their fingers slightly, as if to remind the predator and the alpha beast alike of the strange offer still on the table. Their voice was quiet, but carried with surprising strength. Easy now, they said, the tone more like someone speaking to restless animals than to mortal danger. The alpha beast's head tilted a fraction, as if trying to understand the strange two-legged creature before it. Its eyes were small but bright and sharp, full of primal calculation. It took another step forward, the ground shaking. The predator responded with a hiss and a sharp flick of the tail, its body lowering into a coil, ready to spring. Its breath came faster now, but not from fear, from the weight of decision pressing hard against instinct. The humans stepped forward, once placing themselves just at the predator's side, their gaze fixed on the alpha beast. Without flinching, their other hand raised slowly, palm open in a gesture of calm, they crouched slightly and set the piece of food down on the same flat rock where the predator had eaten earlier. The scent of it lifted into the air, mixing with the smoke from the fire, drifting toward the massive form before them. The alpha beast's nostrils flared, pulling in the unfamiliar scent. Its eyes flicked from the predator to the rock, then back again. It gave a low grunt, its tusks catching the light. As its jaw shifted slightly, the predator stayed motionless, its eyes fixed on the beast's shoulders, waiting for the slightest twitch that would mean an attack. But none came. Instead, the beast took another step closer until it was only a few paces from the edge of the firelight. Every creature in the jungle seemed to be watching. Even those hidden in the highest branches dared not move. The predator could feel them, the countless eyes, waiting to see if blood would stain the clearing tonight, or if something stranger was about to happen. The human knelt by the fire, their body loose, their every movement slow, deliberate, their voice coming again soft and low. "Try it," they said, though the words were more to the air than to either beast. The alpha beast shifted its weight forward, lowering its massive head toward the rock. The predator tensed so hard its muscles felt like iron wires ready to snap. Yet still it held its ground as the beast's jaws opened and its huge tongue swept out to pull the food into its mouth. It chewed once, twice, and then lifted its head again, the deep rumble in its chest fading into a sound that was not quite a growl, but not quite peace either. The predator blinked slowly, its own breathing easing slightly, though its body remained ready. The human glanced up at it, and for the first time since their strange meeting offered a small, real smile, their eyes saying something the predator could not name, but understood all the same. The alpha beast backed away one step, then another, its tusks catching the light one last time before the shadows of the jungle closed around it again. The ground seemed to exhale as it vanished into the dark. Silence settled over the clearing, but it was not the same silence as before. This one felt heavier, filled with the memory of danger and the echo of an unspoken agreement. The predator slowly turned its head toward the human, its green eyes catching the firelight, its body no longer a drawn bow ready to strike, but something looser, something watchful. The human sat down again, cross-legged by the fire, their movements unhurried, their hands resting lightly on their knees. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, neither speaking. The jungle slowly began to breathe again, a distant call of a night bird, the faint rustle of small creatures daring to move through the undergrowth. The predator glanced toward the shadows where the alpha beast had gone, then back to the human. There was still no fear in their eyes, only curiosity and something close to respect. The human reached into the metal container again, pulling out another piece of food. This time they held it in their open palm and extended it toward the predator. The predator stepped closer, its claws barely scratching the dirt, its head lowering to take the food from the human's hand, its teeth careful not to touch skin. The warmth of the food filled its mouth, and the strange, unfamiliar satisfaction spread through its body. The fire crackled, throwing up a small shower of sparks that drifted into the air. The predator's gaze followed them briefly before returning to the human. The air between them was no longer sharp with threat. Instead, it carried a fragile thread of understanding, not yet trust, but the possibility of it. The human leaned back, resting their weight on their hands, their eyes drifting briefly to the canopy above, as if checking for unseen watchers. In the distance, the deep voice of the alpha beast came once more, but softer now, a call that sounded more like a warning to others than a promise of return. The predator's ears turned toward it, catching every note. Before the sound faded into the thick night, the human glanced in the same direction, their face unreadable in the shifting firelight, then turned back to the predator with that same faint smile. A breeze moved through the clearing for the first time that night, carrying with it the scents of the jungle, the smoke of the fire, and the fading trace of the alpha beast's passage. The predator stood in the center of it all, feeling the strangeness of what had just happened, a meal shared between hunter-prey and a greater predator. Without bloodshed, the jungle would remember this night. The human reached for their pack, adjusting it slightly before setting it down again. They spoke softly, as if talking to themselves, uneasy peace. The word slipping into the air like a small truth they knew might not last. The predator's ears caught the sound, even if it could not grasp the meaning, its gaze never leaving the human's face, as the firelight continued to dance between them and the vast dark beyond. The night seemed calmer after the alpha beast left the clearing. The fire crackled softly, and the jungle sounds began to return. Small creatures rustled in the leaves above, while far away a bird gave a single sharp call before settling again. The predator stood near the fire, its eyes still fixed on the shadows, where the huge creature had disappeared, its tail moving in slow, deliberate arcs, as if marking time. The human sat quietly cross-legged by the flames, their hands resting on their knees, their gaze shifting between the predator and the dark beyond. The piece felt thin, like a fragile leaf, floating on deep water. One touch could break it. The predator's ears twitched, catching a low, faint hum from somewhere far away, not the growl of the alpha beast, but something different, colder, more unnatural. The human's head turned slightly, listening to the same sound, their brows narrowing just a fraction, as though they recognized it. The predator's nostrils flared, tasting the air, but this scent was strange, not of any living thing it had hunted before. The hum grew slowly louder, carrying a vibration that crawled along the ground and into the bones of both hunter and human. The firelight trembled, as if the very air was unsettled. The predator stepped closer to the human, not in aggression, but in shared alertness. The human reached into their pack, pulling out a small dark object that fit into the palm of their hand, its surface smooth and metallic, with a faint glow along one side. They pressed their thumb against it, and it came to life with a soft blue shimmer. The predator tilted its head, watching the strange object, but its attention kept being pulled back toward the source of the hum. Deep in the jungle, shadows began to move, shapes without clear form gliding between the trees, too smooth, too fast to be natural. The human rose slowly to their feet, one hand holding the device, the other lowering to their side, their stance balanced, calm but ready. The predator moved a half step forward, its body lowering into a crouch, claws digging into the dirt. The shapes in the distance grew clearer, pale glints catching on edges of metal as they passed through moonlight breaking through the leaves above. The predator realized these were not beasts, but machines, tall and thin, moving on jointed limbs, their heads small and round with a single glowing eye in the center. They advanced in a tight formation, each step in perfect sync. The hum came from them, rising and falling like a heartbeat made of wires and steel. The human's jaw tightened just slightly. They turned to glance at the predator, and then back to the approaching machines. The device in their hand pulsed brighter. The predator could feel its own heart beating faster, its instincts telling it this was danger far beyond the usual rhythm of hunt and kill. These things carried no scent of life, no fear, no hesitation. The machines reached the edge of the clearing, their glowing eyes scanning in unison the firelight, reflecting off their smooth surfaces. The predator gave a low growl, a sound it usually kept for only the most dangerous of threats. The human lifted the device and pointed it toward the machines, a faint hum answering the one in the air, now both sounds weaving together in a tense electric thread. The lead machine stepped forward, its limbs moving with unnatural precision, its single eye focusing directly on the human. The predator shifted its weight, placing itself between the human and the machine, just as it had against the alpha beast. But this felt different. These enemies would not be swayed by food or fear. The human spoke in a low voice, without looking away from the machines. "We may have to move," the words falling like stones into the tense air. The predator's tail flicked once in agreement, or perhaps simply in readiness. The machines advanced another step, the glow of their eyes brightening. The predator hissed, but they did not pause. The human's hand tightened around the device, and they pressed something along its side. The blue shimmer leapt into the air, forming a faint circular barrier around them. and the fire its edges, humming with a sharp electric note. The machines stopped just short of the barrier, their eyes scanning it, their limbs twitching in small precise motions, as if calculating the next move. The predator circled inside the barrier, keeping its gaze locked on them, its body ready to strike. The humans' eyes never left the lead machine, their face calm, but with a focused tension that had not been there before. The jungle beyond the clearing fell silent again, as if even the smallest creatures knew this was no ordinary danger. One of the machines raised an arm-like limb ending in a cluster of thin needles. The predator snarled, baring all its teeth. The human's device pulsed brighter, the barrier's hum rising in pitch. Suddenly a streak of light shot from the machine's arm, hitting the barrier. With a sharp crack of energy, the glow around them flickered, but held the predator, flinched back, then crouched low, its muscles coiled. The human took a step toward the barrier, as if daring the machines to try again. The air grew heavy with the smell of ozone. The machines began to spread out, circling the clearing, their movements perfectly timed. The predator moved with them, keeping pace inside the barrier, always between them and the human. The human adjusted something on the device, the barrier's light growing steadier, the blue glow reflecting faintly in their eyes. For a moment there was no movement, only the slow circling of predator and prey, roles twisted and unclear in this strange standoff. Then the hum shifted again, a deeper tone rolling from the machines. As one they stopped moving, and the lead machine stepped forward, once more, its head tilting slightly, as if listening to something far away. The predator's ears flicked, catching a sound beyond the machine's faint but real, the heavy crashing of something massive moving fast toward the clearing. The human's eyes narrowed, and they muttered low, almost to themselves, "Not now." The sound grew louder, branches breaking under great weight, leaves falling in a rain from the canopy. The predator recognized it instantly, the alpha beast returning, but this time its growl was different, less a threat, more a warning. The machines turned their heads toward the sound, their formation shifting. The predator felt the air tighten once again, as two great dangers now faced each other. In the same moment the humans stepped back toward the fire, their voice low and firm. "Stay close," they said, the words carrying more weight than before. The alpha beast broke through the tree line, its tusks glinting in the firelight, its body massive and ready, its eyes sweeping over the machines, and then to the predator and human standing behind the faint glow of the barrier. The ground shook as it stepped forward. The machines shifted their stance, as if recalculating. The predator's tail lashed the human's hand tightened on the device. The fire snapped, sending sparks into the night, and the clearing became a frozen moment, balanced on the edge of chaos. The clearing shook as the alpha beast faced the machines, its deep growl rumbling through the ground. The predator stood inside the glowing barrier, its green eyes flicking between the massive creature it once feared and the cold, unblinking machines that now threatened them all. The human stood still near the fire, one hand on the humming device that kept the thin wall of blue light around them, the other hand relaxed at their side, but ready to move. In an instant the air was thick with the heat of the fire and the metallic tang of charged energy. The alpha beast stepped forward, the ground cracking under its weight, its tusks low and gleaming, its small bright eyes locked on the machines. The lead machine tilted its head slightly, as if analyzing the new arrival, its single glowing eye pulsing brighter. For a moment the predator could feel every muscle in its body tight as coiled rope, waiting for the first move to break the standoff. The human's gaze moved from the beast to the machines and back, their lips pressing together. In thought they adjusted something on the device, the blue barrier flaring brighter. The predator felt the hum in its bones. The machines began to spread again, their metal limbs moving with precision, their hum rising in pitch. The alpha beast let out another roar, shaking loose leaves from the canopy. The predator's ears flattened, and its tail lashed, once a silent promise that it was ready to act. Without warning, the lead machine fired a streak of light at the alpha beast, the beam slicing the air. With a sharp hiss, the beast jerked aside the blast, burning a deep scar into the tree. Behind it, the smell of scorched wood mixed with the smoke of the fire. The alpha beast's roar tore through the night, louder than anything the predator had ever heard. It charged the machines, its tusks swinging like curved blades, its massive feet tearing the earth. The machines moved to meet it, their limbs snapping forward with inhuman speed, metal claws flashing in the firelight. The sound of the clash rang through the clearing, metal striking against tusk. The predator's claws scraped the dirt, its body low, its breath fast. The human's voice came soft but firm. "Now." They said the predator's head snapped toward them, and for the first time it understood the meaning the moment to fight had come. The human pressed a side panel on the device. The barrier dropped instantly, the blue glow, fading the hum, vanishing into the night. The predator launched forward. Without hesitation, its muscles surging with power, it crashed into the nearest machine, claws tearing into metal sparks, flying. As the machine twisted in its grip, the predator's fangs sank deep into the joint of its neck, wires snapping like brittle vines. The alpha beast slammed into two more machines, crushing one under its massive weight and tossing the other aside with a swing of its tusks. The human moved quickly behind the predator, pulling something small and dark from their pack. With one swift motion, they flung it toward a machine. A flash of blue light erupted on contact, the machine collapsing. As its single eye dimmed to black, the predator ripped the remains of its opponent apart and turned to face another, its tail cutting the air in wide sweeps. The machines did not retreat. They adapted their formation, shifting to surround the alpha beast and predator. The human ran to the edge of the firelight, crouching low and pulling open a small metal case from inside. They removed another device, this one longer and heavier, a faint green glow running along its surface. They tapped it once, and it hummed to life. The predator glanced back at them for a brief moment before leaping at another machine, claws digging into its torso as it tried to stab with needle-tipped limbs. The alpha beast took a deep cut to its side, but did not slow. It swung its tusks in a wide arc, catching two machines at once and sending them crashing into the trees. The sound of shattering metal filled the clearing. The human raised the new device and aimed at the lead machine. A beam of green light shot out, striking it in the chest. The metal hissed and smoked, the glowing eye flickering violently. The predator saw its chance and lunged, tearing into the weakened chest plate until the machine collapsed in a heap of sparking wires. With their leader down, the remaining machines hesitated just for a moment, but it was enough. The alpha beast roared again, charging into them. The predator moved alongside it, now not as hunter and rival, but as fighters bound by the battle. Their movements almost in sync. The human advanced behind them, firing the green beam in sharp bursts, each strike melting through machine armor. The ground became a chaos of sparks, claws, tusks, and blinding light. One machine managed to break through the chaos, heading straight for the human. The predator saw it, and without thought broke away from its own fight, sprinting across the clearing and slamming into it. Before it could strike, the two rolled in a tangle of metal and fur, the predator biting and clawing until its fangs found the delicate wiring at the base of its head. The machine went still and silent. The predator rose, its chest heaving, its gaze locking briefly with the human, who gave a quick nod before turning back to fire again. The alpha beast crushed the last standing machine beneath its massive foot, the metal shrieking in protest before snapping into the hum that had filled the clearing faded, leaving only the sound of fire and the ragged breathing of living things. The predator stood beside the alpha beast, both spattered with oil and faint traces of blood. The human walked toward them, lowering the green glowing weapon. The air between the three was heavy, but no longer sharp with threat. The alpha beast stepped back slowly, its eyes sweeping over the predator and the human once more before turning toward the jungle, its great body moving with less aggression than before. The predator watched it vanish into the shadows, its tusks catching the last glint of firelight. Then it was gone. The human turned to the predator, their lips curling into a faint, tired smile, their voice low. "You fight well," they said. The predator tilted its head, feeling something stir in its chest, a strange warm weight that had nothing to do with hunger. The fire crackled. The jungle slowly began to breathe again. The predator moved closer to the human, its tail swaying low in the dirt. The human crouched and reached into their pack. Pulling out the familiar metal container, they opened it and held out a piece of food. The predator stepped forward, took it gently from their hand, and ate the warmth, filling its mouth and stomach. In the still night air, the human sat down heavily, cross-legged once more, the predator lying nearby, its eyes half closed, but its ears still tuned to the jungle. In the distance, faint and far, the sound of more machines echoed through the trees, but softer, slower, as if still searching for something. The human glanced toward the sound, then back to the predator, their voice barely above a whisper. "It's not over," they said, but there was no fear in their tone, only certainty. The predator's eyes narrowed slightly, its body still and alert. The firelight flickered between them, casting long shadows that merged on the ground as the night closed in once more around this uneasy alliance. The clearing smelled of smoke and scorched metal. The fire had burned low, leaving only a circle of glowing embers that pulsed like the heartbeat of the night. The predator lay near the edge of the light, its green eyes half closed, but always watching, its body tired from the fight, yet still ready if danger came again. The human sat cross-legged by the dying fire, their head bowed slightly as they adjusted the strange green glowing weapon before setting it aside. The jungle around them had gone quiet, but not with the deep silence of fear. This was a different quiet, the kind that comes after storms, when the air feels heavier, and the ground still remembers the weight of the battle. The predator shifted slightly, its muscles aching from the clash with the machines, its claws coated in a faint black sheen of machine oil. The human glanced at it, their lips curling into a faint smile, as they reached into their pack, the familiar soft clink of the metal container breaking the stillness. They opened it, the scent of the food drifting into the air, warm and rich against the cooler smells of the jungle. They held a piece out in their open palm, their voice soft and almost amused. "Breakfast," they said, as if the word itself carried some private joke between them now. The predator rose slowly, padding over with measured steps, its head lowering to take the food from the human's hand, its sharp teeth careful not to graze the skin. It chewed slowly, the taste familiar and strangely comforting, as if the flavor itself carried the memory of the night's strange events. The human pulled another piece from the container and placed it on the flat rock by the fire, the same rock that had served as their table on the first offering. The predator took that piece too, and then sat back on its haunches, tail curling loosely around its legs. The jungle began to murmur again, leaves shifting high above, small movements in the undergrowth, the distant call of a night bird. The human leaned back, resting on their hands, their eyes fixed on the canopy, as if searching for something in the patterns of the leaves. The predator followed their gaze, but saw only the faint movement of branches swaying in a light breeze. The air was cooler, now carrying with it the scent of distant rain. From far away came the faint hum again, not as strong as before, but enough to make the predator's ears twitch. The human heard it too, their head turning slightly in that direction, their face calm, but with a shadow of focus in their eyes. The predator moved a little closer, its body low, as if ready to rise at the first sign of real danger. The human looked at it and spoke again, their voice even and sure. "We will see them again," they said, not in fear but in certainty. The fire cracked softly, a thin ribbon of smoke curling upward into the canopy. The predator watched it rise and vanish into the dark. The human reached out slowly and placed their hand flat on the ground between them, their palm open and relaxed. The predator stared at it for a long moment before lowering its head and pressing its nose lightly against the skin. The human's fingers curled slightly, not in control, not in command, but in quiet acknowledgement. The night stretched on with no more threats. The predator lay near the human, the warmth of the embers painting faint glows across its fur, its mind turning over the events of the night, the hunt that had never become a kill, the offering of food. The battle fought not alone, but side by side with one it should have seen as prey, the alpha beast, the machines, all of it settling into a strange new shape in its instincts. When the first thin line of dawn began to cut through the trees, the light touched the clearing with pale silver. The predator lifted its head, ears turning toward the sound of morning creatures. Waking, the human was already moving quietly, breaking down what little of the camp remained. Their actions practiced and efficient, they poured the last of the water from a canteen onto the embers, sending a thin hiss into the air. The predator watched every motion as if committing them to memory. The human packed the metal container last, tapping the lid closed before sliding it into their bag. They stood slinging the strap over one shoulder, then looked down at the predator, their voice low and calm. "We move together," they said, the word simple and certain. The predator blinked slowly, then rose to its feet, standing at the human's side, the faint morning light glinting off its eyes. They stepped into the jungle side by side, the human moving with quiet steps, the predator gliding silently beside them, the canopy above dripping faint traces of last night's dew onto their shoulders, the ground soft with fallen leaves. The hum from the machines was gone, now replaced by the living chorus of the waking forest. Yet somewhere in the air, both knew that the danger had not vanished, only moved farther away for now. The predator paused once, glancing back toward the clearing where the fire had burned. The humans stopped to their eyes, following the predator's gaze. For a brief moment, the clearing stood empty save for the faint scent of smoke and the memory of the night's events. Then the predator turned forward again, its tail brushing lightly against the human's leg before slipping ahead into the path. The human followed, without question, their steps falling into an easy rhythm with the predator's pace. The morning grew brighter, the shafts of sunlight breaking through the thick canopy in thin golden lines that painted the path. In shifting light, the predator's ears turned, constantly scanning for sounds. The human's eyes moved over every shadow and branch, both alert but neither tense. It was the watchfulness of those who knew they would not face the next challenge alone. The ground began to rise, leading them toward higher ground, where the air felt fresher and the forest opened into small clearings filled with bright plants. At the top of a small ridge, they paused, the human resting one hand on the trunk of a broad tree, the predator standing beside them, looking out over the stretch of jungle below. From here, the world seemed endless, a sea of green broken only by the occasional silver flash of a distant river. The human glanced down at the predator, a quiet smile touching their face, their voice soft but carrying the weight of truth. "Breakfast tomorrow," they said, not as a question but as a promise. The predator tilted its head, the words meaningless in sound, yet somehow understood. In feeling, it gave a small, low sound deep in its chest. Not a growl, not a threat, something else entirely. The human turned and began walking again, the predator falling into step beside them, their shapes moving together through the shifting light of the morning forest. Two hunters, once meant to be enemies, now bound by something the jungle itself might never have seen before. As they disappeared into the trees, the sounds of the forest swallowed them, the path ahead uncertain, the dangers still waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. Yet neither looked back, neither hesitated in their steps, for in that strange quiet between night and day, they had forged something rare and fragile, and perhaps stronger than either could name, a pact made not in words or oaths, but in shared danger, shared fire, and the simple act of offering breakfast in the heart of a hostile world.